Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Ooh, spooky.
You know it. It is the holiday season after all.
That's right.
And to celebrate, we're taking a look at a true horror classic,
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Black Christmas.
Black Christmas. Wow, that's a good one.
It is, and it's turning 50.
50 years. I feel old.
Me too. But what's really fascinating is how this slasher film...
Still holds up.
Exactly. I mean, it still feels so relevant even today.
You know, you're right.
So that's what we're going to dig into today.
I'm excited.
We're going to explore why this movie still resonates with audiences.
All right.
And we'll also be uncovering some really clever insights.
Oh, tell me more.
From the one and only Lynn Griffin.
Wait, Lynn Griffin, as in Claire from Black Christmas.
The one and only. She gave a fantastic interview to the Horror Heals podcast.
Oh, I love Kendall and Corey. They always ask such great questions.
They do. So we'll be revisiting some of those questions too.
Awesome. I'm ready to dive in.
Me too. Buckle up, because this deep dive is going to get chillin'.
I am buckled. So what is it about Black Christmas that makes it so timeless?
Well, for me, it's the way it tackles these universal themes that are...
Still so relevant today.
Right. Even though it's filmed back in '73 and released in '74.
Wow. That's almost hard to believe.
I know, right? But the themes of, like, women's rights and mental health...
Yeah, those definitely still resonate today.
They do. It's kind of spooky how Bob Clark, the director...
Predicted it all.
It's like he had a crystal ball or something.
He was ahead of his time, that's for sure.
He really was.
So how does the film handle these, complex issues?
Well, it's subtle, but it's incredibly effective.
Subtlety is key.
I agree. Take Jess's decision to have an abortion.
Oh, yeah. That was groundbreaking for the time.
It was. And even today, it sparks these conversations.
About bodily autonomy and a woman's right to choose.
Exactly. And then you have Billy.
The mysterious killer.
Right. And the film doesn't shy away from the complexities of his character.
The mental health aspect.
Exactly.
It's a really unsettling portrayal of a disturbed mind.
It is. And then there's Peter.
Ugh, Peter.
Yeah, his misogyny is... It really is. And it's a chilling reminder that...
some things haven't changed as much as we'd like to believe.
Sadly, that's true.
So Bob Clark managed to weave all these themes into a slasher film.
He did.
Yeah.
And he did it without being preachy.
Yeah, it never feels like a lecture.
It's more like...
social commentary disguised as a terrifying thriller.
Exactly. Which is why I think Black Christmas is still so impactful all these years later.
You mentioned Lynn Griffin earlier.
I did.
She seems like such a fascinating person.
She is. She's got this sharp wit and humor that's...
kind of unexpected.
Yeah, especially considering the dark subject matter we're dealing with.
Did you hear about her convention joke?
Oh, you mean the one where she says she'll put a bag over her head?
When things get slow.
Yep. It's morbid.
But hilarious.
Totally. I mean, it takes a certain kind of cleverness to... Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that cleverness shines through in her interview with Kendall and Corey.
Speaking of cleverness, I remember Lynn had some really interesting insights about the film itself.
She did. Remember the line about removing a wart?
Oh, yeah. She suggested it could be about abortion.
I know.
Wow. That's some deep interpretation, especially considering when the film was made.
It really makes you wonder how much of that subtext was intentional on Bob Clark's part.
That's the beauty of Black Christmas, isn't it?
What do you mean?
It operates on these multiple levels.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like on the surface, you have the slasher horror.
But then there's these deeper layers of meaning.
That make you think critically about the characters and the societal context.
So true. And Lynn seems to be totally in on that, like she gets it.
She totally gets it. And remember when she talked about coming up with the idea?
To play a sweet grandma who's secretly a serial killer.
Yes. What a brilliant concept.
I know, right? And it totally plays on those horror tropes of subverting expectations.
You think grandma's safe, but then bam, she's the villain.
It makes me wonder if she drew any inspiration from Black Christmas for that idea.
That's an interesting thought.
Like, she took the concept of hidden darkness and flipped it.
Turning the seemingly innocent into the source of terror?
Exactly. It was brilliant.
It really speaks to Lynn's ability to understand the psychology of horror.
I think you're right.
Both in terms of the characters and the audience's expectations.
Okay, so we've got a socially relevant horror classic.
Check.
And a clever actress with a killer idea.
Check.
But let's not forget about the mastermind behind it all, Bob Clark.
The director.
Yes. And one thing that I find fascinating is this contrast.
Between the film's darkness and the atmosphere on set.
Yes. Tell me you've heard about this too.
I have. Lynn described him as such a jovial person.
The total goofball, right?
It's surprising, to say the least.
You'd think a horror director would be, like, super intense and brooding.
Right. But Lynn said he was always singing and cracking jokes.
Even during the filming of the most intense scenes.
It's hard to imagine.
It really is. But I wonder if that's part of what made the film so effective.
What do you mean?
Well, maybe that lighthearted energy on set allowed the actors to tap into those darker emotions more easily.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like, by creating a safe and fun environment, Bob Clark helped them explore the darker side of the story.
Without feeling overwhelmed by it.
Exactly. It speaks to the collaborative nature of filmmaking.
The director sets the tone, but the actors bring the characters to life.
And it sounds like Bob Clark really understood that.
He knew how to foster creativity and trust.
Speaking of fostering creativity, we can't forget those insightful questions from Kendall and Corey on the Horror Hills podcast.
Oh, they were fantastic.
They really dug deep with Lynn.
And uncovered some fascinating insights about the film and its legacy.
They did. One question that stood out to me was,
About a sequel.
yes, whether Bob Clark ever intended to make one,
And Lynn believes the open ending was intentional.
which is so clever.
It leaves it up to the audience to imagine what happens next.
It's like the ultimate cliffhanger.
And it allows the horror to linger long after the film is over.
Exactly. I'm curious, did they happen to ask Lynn about the iconic poster?
You mean the one with Claire in the rocking chair?
Yes. That image is burned into my memory.
Mine too. It's so creepy.
It is. And Lynn mentioned that Bob showed her the mock-up on set.
Oh, wow. Imagine seeing that image plastered everywhere years later.
It must have been surreal.
It really speaks to the enduring power of imagery in horror.
Okay, so we've covered the film's relevance, Lynn's cleverness, and even got a glimpse of what it was like on set.
This has been great.
But where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's time to delve into those thought-provoking questions from Horror Heels.
Good idea.
They really touched upon some key elements of the film.
They did.
And I think exploring their insights will give us an even better understanding of why Black Christmas is still so relevant today.
I agree. Let's dive in.
You know, one thing that Kendall and Corey really highlighted was how Black Christmas leaves so much up to the audience's imagination,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
especially when it comes to the killer, like his identity and his motives.
Totally. I mean, the film never explicitly reveals who Billy is.
Right. And we're left wondering why he's doing these horrible things.
And I think the ambiguity is one of the things that makes the film so effective.
I agree. It's not just about the scares we see on screen. It's about the...
Questions that stay with us long after the credits roll.
Exactly. You're left with this unsettling feeling.
Like, what if?
Like something terrible happened, but we don't know the full story.
It's like the horror lingers in your mind.
It definitely does. That lack of closure, that ambiguity.
It's what fuels those deep-seated fears.
It makes us imagine those worst-case scenarios.
Like, what if someone is watching me right now?
Exactly. Black Christmas taps into some very primal fears.
It does.
The idea of an intruder invading your safe space,
And you're totally vulnerable.
and you don't even know who or why.
It's terrifying. And it's something that everyone can relate to.
Right. It doesn't matter what time period you live in. Those fears are universal.
And the fact that the victims are young women, it adds another layer of...
Vulnerability.
yes. And this brings us back to the film's social commentary.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Remember how Kendall and Corey pointed out how Black Christmas
Hmm?
can be seen as a commentary on...
The dangers women face?
Exactly. And it's not just about physical violence either,
Right. The film touches on these more insidious forms of abuse.
like gaslighting and manipulation.
And the ways women's voices are often dismissed or ignored.
It's so frustrating.
It is. Think about the phone calls the girls receive.
The obscene and threatening ones.
Right. Those are absolutely terrifying. But the police are so dismissive.
Yeah, they're almost nonchalant about it,
It's like they don't take the threat seriously.
which sadly mirrors the way many women's experiences with harassment are often treated.
Exactly. Their fears are downplayed or completely ignored.
And that lack of validation, it's just as relevant today as it was back in the 70s.
It's a chilling reminder that some things haven't changed as much as we'd hoped.
Sadly, you're right.
Yeah,
But films like Black Christmas can help keep these conversations going.
they can. And hopefully they can spark some real change.
I hope so. It's like holding up a mirror to society and saying,
Look, this is still happening.
we need to do better.
Exactly. And Black Christmas does that so effectively.
It's not just entertainment,
It's a social commentary. It's a reflection of our fears.
and it's a call to action.
You know, we keep coming back to this idea of the contrast between the film's darkness.
And the lightheartedness on set.
Right. Lynn's stories about Bob Clark being this jovial guy.
It's almost hard to believe.
I know. A horror director who loves to sing and tell
It's
jokes.
like, how is that even possible?
But maybe that contrast played a role in the film's success.
What do you mean?
Well, maybe that lighthearted energy allowed the actors to explore those dark emotions more freely.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like, if you know you're in a safe and supportive environment
You can let your guard down.
and really tap into those raw, vulnerable emotions
That's a fascinating thought. Maybe Bob Clark understood that.
to create true horror
You need that balance.
of light and dark.
It's like that saying, you need light to see the shadows.
Exactly. And speaking of shadows and light,
Yes.
I think it's time we talk about the ending of Black Christmas.
Oh, yes. The ending. It's one of the most talked about aspects of the film.
And for good reason. It's ambiguous, it's unsettling.
It leaves you with so many questions.
And Kendall and Corey had some great questions for Lynn about it.
They did. I especially loved her response to their question about a sequel.
Right. She believes the open ending was intentional.
And it was Bob Clark's way of letting the audience
Decide for themselves what happens next.
I love that. It's like he's giving us the power to create our own horror story.
And that's what makes the ending so effective.
You're left with this feeling of dread, this uncertainty.
Like something terrible has happened, but we don't know the details.
And that's where our imaginations take over.
We fill in the blanks with our own fears and anxieties.
And that's what makes the ending so profoundly unsettling.
It's not just about what happens to the characters in the film.
It's about the larger questions it raises.
About safety, trust, and the fragility of our own reality.
And it makes you wonder, could this happen to me?
Exactly. And that's what makes Black Christmas so timeless.
It taps into these universal fears that we all share.
And it reminds us that even in the midst of holiday cheer,
Darkness can lurk in the most unexpected places.
so be careful out there.
And keep the lights on. So we've talked about why Black Christmas is still so relevant.
50 years later.
It's crazy, right? And Lynn Griffin's insights were just...
Brilliant.
But what really makes this film stick with you even after the holidays are over?
You know, for me, it's how it just gets under your skin.
What do you mean?
It taps into this primal fear, like something deep down inside us.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Like the idea of someone invading your safe space.
Or not knowing who to trust.
It just messes with your sense of security.
And it makes you think twice about answering the phone.
Especially during the holidays. But it's not just the external threat, right?
No, you're right.
The film also shows us those internal struggles the characters are going through.
Like Jess.
Yes. She's dealing with a tough decision.
All those societal pressures.
Exactly. It's like the film is saying, hey, life's not always perfect, even during the holidays.
Yeah, there's always that potential for darkness.
And horror movies, they kind of force us to confront that darkness.
Yeah, to acknowledge those uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world.
And Black Christmas doesn't shy away from those truths.
It doesn't. It makes us ask those tough questions.
About trust, safety, our own biases.
And it doesn't give us easy answers.
It leaves us unsettled, questioning everything.
And that's what makes it so powerful, right?
I think so. It makes you think. It makes you feel
And it makes you remember.
long after you've seen it.
It's not just passive entertainment. It's an experience.
And it speaks to Bob Clark's talent as a director.
He was a visionary, that's for sure.
He created this masterpiece of horror, but also this subtle social commentary.
And remember, he did it all with a sense of humor.
Lynn said he was always joking around on set.
It's hard to imagine, right?
It is, but maybe that's part of what made him so great.
Maybe he understood that to create true horror, you need that balance.
Of light and dark, of humor and terror.
It's like finding the beauty in the macabre.
Exactly. And I think that's an important reminder for us as viewers, too.
What do you mean?
Well, that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope.
And there's always a reason to laugh.
It's about finding those moments of joy, even in the face of fear.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Black Christmas,
It's safe to say that this film is more than just a slasher flick.
it's a timeless classic that speaks to our deepest fears,
And reminds us that darkness can lurk anywhere.
even during the most wonderful time of year.
So stay curious, stay spooky, and keep those lights on.
And happy holidays, everyone.